Hey everyone, this is Andy Hall, and with me this morning is Nathan Timmel. Nathan is a comedian, a author, and a podcaster. And you want to know how funny Nathan is? I have a clip from his YouTube channel to show you. So let's play that right now.
But now he's potty trained, but he uses the toilet differently. He's not a normal kid. He's a little fella. He's a little shrimper of a fella, and I don't know why he does this. My wife trained him how to use a toilet, but instead what he does, no matter if he has to go number one or number two, he enters the bathroom and he sort of eyeballs the toilet a little bit, lines it up, then he approaches thusly, climbs on top, and squats down. This is how he goes to the bathroom. No matter what he has to do, this is what he's doing. And a little while back, I walked by the bathroom and saw him on the toilet like this. He likes to leave the door open and share with the world. It's not shy. And he's just squatting there, and I asked him, like, buddy, what's up? He said, nothing. I said, do you gotta poop? He goes, no. I said, do you have to pee? He goes, I already did. I said, then what are you still doing there? And he whispered, he said, there's no toilet paper. He likes to wipe his dick after a good pee. Even after a bad one. Is there such a thing? I think they're all pretty good, right? They're pretty... So what I did is I told him, like, oh, if there's ever no toilet paper on the roll there, look at this drawer. We have a drawer right here. We keep a spare. I opened it up, pulled it out. I tore off one square of toilet paper. I handed it to him. He took the toilet paper. He dabbed his ding-a-ling, wiped his mouth, and then dropped it in the toilet. So I said the only thing I could think to say at a moment like that, which was, good job, buddy, why don't you, go give mommy a kiss? Let her know that you love her.
Dude, freaking hilarious.
Those are the easiest jokes to write because they're not jokes. It's just that's what happens, and then I just get to talk about it. So that's why I like talking about life as opposed to sitting down and going, Chinese food. How can I make Chinese food funny? It's just, right. I mean, because I remember staring sort of blank-faced or dumbfounded when he took the toilet paper and wiped his mouth. I'm just like, all right. You know, that's going to be tough. Like yesterday, I took him, he and his sister had their annual, the once a year, how are they growing, how are they developing? And our pediatrician, great guy, talking through it. He's 6 years old now. And talking through it, saying, I'm going to take down your underpants. I'm going to check your privates. The only time that should happen is with a doctor and your parents are in the room giving permission. And I'm like, yep, buddy, the only time. And I could see from where I was sitting, my son got a little boner when he started getting his privates checked. And I'm like, I don't know what the joke will be, but there will be something about my son getting a little Thumbelina during his physical because it's just amusing. He's just giggling like that tickles as he gets his 6-year-old erection. That's.
And you're right. The best jokes are the ones that come out of real life, but there is real art to structuring the joke, right? To doing the beats as well as the physical aspect of it. Now, when you were first thinking of the joke, did you think you're going to do the physical stuff, the physical motion of sitting on the toilet or standing on the toilet?
Nope. The first few times I told it on stage, I walked the audience through it. And I think what happened, I'm not positive. I think there was an open chair in the front row at one point. And, you know, I don't want to say improv, maybe more prop comedy. Yeah. I just grabbed it and the laughter, you know, went tenfold. It exploded. I'm like, I guess I'm doing that every time now.
Exactly.
So if I had a contract, that would be in my writer. Please make a chair available on stage or near the stage. Yeah, and the beats happen with the laughter. Like the first time I told it, I was probably talking fast, kind of like I'm talking right now and not giving you space to breathe. And then the more you tell it, you realize, oh, they laughed there. I can slow it down and pace it and not have to rush. I think anytime you tell a first joke, it's kind of rushed because you're nervous and excited.
Oh, right. And that's the thing, isn't it? You can get too excited and you're not there in the moment to
Yes.
respond to the crowd.
Yep. You can, happens sometimes in situations like this where you're videocasting and I was my friend and I were catching up with a college roommate we had not talked to in 30 years. That's how old we are.
Yeah.
And all three of us are having these memories, and we were trying not to talk over one another, but it just started happening. We'd have to like step back because, wait, what about this memory? And yeah, sometimes you're too in the moment, and
right.
It worked better once we all slowed down and gave each other space to breathe and tell our stories and then react to the person talking, as opposed to trying to jump on it with our own unique take on that moment.
Right. Fascinating. So it's the apocalypse. Is there any comedy scene in where now you should tell people where you are? You're in Iowa.
I'm in Iowa City, and as of this morning, that's kind of why I wore this shirt. As of this morning, Iowa City ranked number 5 on the worst places for coronavirus, according to the New York Times. So New York City was ranked 509, and Iowa City ranked 5 because we reopened our college and the students all went, hey, there are bars. Let's go into those and pack them in. And so it's not like, I don't know how many cases we have, but it exploded. The rate shot up dramatically because of unsafe practices.
Insane. Yeah, I'm looking at the RT Live site that I like to look at to see how states are doing. And you guys are at a 1.17 right now, which means that it's spreading. But you already know that.
And I think wasn't New York City something like at 0.02 or 0.2, or it was under, it was way down the line.
Yeah. Iowa is the 3rd highest state in terms of COVID-19 cases. South Dakota, gosh, I wonder how that happened, is number 1. And Hawaii is number 2, and then Iowa is,
I don't know about South Dakota, but see, I was going to say, yeah, it makes sense that Iowa's number 3 because I said Iowa City's number 5 as far as urban areas. Well, Ames, Iowa State, is number 3. So we have 2 towns in the top 10 worst places to be for the spread of coronavirus right now.
So I'm assuming there's no comedy clubs open.
There are 2 in Des Moines, and one was closed because it was the big one, the Funny Bone, and they bring big names and they have high overhead. And then a smaller one, I think, is closing down as of last night. Our governor issued a county by county where it's spreading the worst. He said bars have to close, restaurants can stay open, other businesses can stay open, but bars is where this is happening, and it's in college towns. And I followed him all day yesterday on Facebook, and he kept saying, we're open tonight. Who knows what's going to happen? And then his last post was, all right, that's it until September 20th, which all day long he was saying, we are not a bar, we're a performance venue, so we're remaining open. And I guess I missed somewhere in there how it went from we're a performance venue, we can stay open, to I guess we're closed tonight along with the rest of the bar. So I don't know what happened, but I thought he was going to remain open because he's the smaller of the 2 clubs, less overhead, can bring in the local comics, not that he doesn't have overhead, he has rent, he has utilities, but he's not bringing in Jim Gaffigan to put someone out there that's in the news today for, I've met Jim Gaffigan. I've followed him for years as a very funny, very clean comedian. So to see him dropping F-bombs on Twitter, go ahead.
It's very difficult for me to keep up with all aspects of the apocalypse at all times.
Right.
I think Abraham Lincoln said something like that. What's going on with Mr. Gaffigan dropping F-bombs on Twitter? What's he talking about?
He watched the RNC and had enough. He knows that he has a large Republican base, and he knows he's a clean comic, and he knows that he has remained apolitical and not taken sides in election for his entire career. And last night he snapped. He said, I've had enough. Trump is just a liar. And one lady tweeted, you just lost a bunch of fans. And he tweeted back, fuck you, Karen. He tweeted, fuck a handful. Coming from Gaffigan, it was quite I mean, it's stunning to see. People were saying, "Wow, Gaffigan snapped. Much props." I mean, he's a clean, down the center kind of guy, and even he has had enough, and will now speak out and say, "If this loses me fans, so be it. I cannot stay silent anymore."
I think to be in the job, to do comedy, and I've talked with other comedians about this, is that one of the common character traits is having or being able to find your anger. And like Jerry Seinfeld's last special, the man in a very funny way just yells at the crowd for like maybe an hour or so. In that way, he has it. So even people who aren't quote unquote angry comics or who work relatively clean, you can smell the undercurrent of anger a lot of the times.
Yes, Seinfeld even did an interview within the past 5 to 7 years. Might have been on Howard Stern, doesn't matter. So he was asked about anger. He said, "Oh yeah, I'm still angry every day. I still think about NBC turning me down several times before giving me a sitcom." And I thought it was interesting. I'm like, wow, you are a multi-millionaire and you're still angry. All right, well, good for him. I mean, it works. It's what you have to do.
Yeah. So Jim Gaffigan just flipped out on Twitter. Wow.
I don't think he flipped out. I think it was very measured, but I mean, we always say flipped out. We always say, oh, someone loses it on Twitter, but Twitter doesn't carry emotion. I mean, the problem with it is, take what he said to that woman, "Fuck you, Karen." He could be typing, "Fuck you, Karen." He could be typing, "Fuck you, Karen." He could be typing, "Fuck you, Karen." I mean, just because someone has a series of tweets, they weren't all caps. They weren't, they weren't anything like Trump tweets that are full of errors. And actually there was a couple that I didn't like. He wrote, anything Trump accuses the Democrats of, he's guilt of himself. I'm like, oh, guilty. It's right there. But yeah, so who knows if he was ranting. He just frustrated, had enough and said, "I'm going to speak my mind."
It is difficult to tweet in the moment because I tweeted a whole bunch of things last night during the first hour that I saw the program, and some of it was crass. I tried to make it fast and funny, but it's a difficult needle to thread.
I ignored all of it. I ignored all of the DNC too. It's just showboating on both sides, and it confuses me every year who the undecideds are that need to watch this to figure out what they're going to do. I don't know that it's that many. I think it's just basically a, puffing of the chest for the base.
Yeah, that's what it is. With Trump, from what I saw of his speech, is that what he does, and I'm not saying anything new, is that he throws a whole bunch of ideas or lots of different tactics out, and he looks to see where he can get traction, and then he goes with that particular pathway. So his hour-long speech last night at the RNC, he definitely threw a lot of stuff out there, and just looking to see what works, looking to see where he can find an opening and push through.
He's admitted to that in the past. He said "drain the swamp" was an accidental. He just off the cuff said it, and it became a chant. And he said in a speech, "I said, oh, it looks like I should use that." Obviously, he didn't live up to it with what his administration became, but his cabinet. I had a thought, then I lost it. As far
but
as
that's
Trump.
Like a comedian, just to bring it back to you and doing
it's an open mic.
With an open mic. It's like, you didn't think of the chair initially to sit down on that bit, but you saw the opening, you played around with it, and now it's hilarious. Trump is the same way. He's in there and he sees what works, and like any comedian, he's like, well, this is what gets the laughs, this is what gets the results, and this is what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, that's why he didn't repeat his "let's drink bleach" comment. I mean, If it doesn't work, he drops it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that a lot of people on our side, or at least I'm speaking for myself, my big lefty side, seem not to understand that that's baked into his strategy, right?
Yes.
That he does shift around a lot, but that's what he does. He rotates people in and out of his crew during an election cycle. And if they're working, they're working. And what might have worked through, a month ago may not be working right now. And so he changes things up. And once again, I'm not a fan of Trump's whatsoever, but you can see the system that he works in.
I'm not a fan of his either, but I have lately been taken to a bizarre sort of obscene admiration for him, because, and I mean this in a genuine way. This is something I can say and people can hear the tone in my voice. If I were to tweet this, it might come off a different way, but the fact that he is able to, and I don't know if he does this consciously or if he is so delusional he believes what he is saying, he's able to stand behind a podium and just throw complete lies out to the audience. I mean, blatant. I mean, he repeated the Democrats left God out of their convention last night after a week of reporting that and videos showing that the Democrats absolutely did not leave God out of their convention. It was one nation under God. They had God in the pledge in many different places. They held prayers, and yet he just bold-faced has no shame in standing saying the Democrats left God out of their convention, out of their platform. And it's like, there is something to be admired in a very sick, twisted way for someone that has no principles, no scruples. And as I said when I started talking a second ago, I don't know if he does it because he believes it himself or if he doesn't care about the truth. It's interesting to watch.
He's an interesting brand of American in the fact that he is a super pragmatist. I don't think he cares about the truth. I think he cares about what works. What works at the moment. He doesn't even care about what works like in 20 minutes from now or an hour from now or a day from now. He cares about what works right now. And if that stops working, it's just going to pivot to somewhere else.
Yep. And this is nothing new, but as long as it benefits him, that's the important thing is, there are rumors, and I know Bill Maher pushes this, that he won't leave the White House if he loses. He'll stay, he'll challenge, and he might do little challenges. I fully believe that his end game is either a stake in One American Network or his own brand, his own, whatever's going to push him. He's done the presidency fine, because then he can just live off of, I got cheated, look what I did in my 4 years. I don't think he needs to stay in the presidency. I think he likes it, but like you said, he'll pivot. Like, oh, I lost. All right, what's next for me?
Right, or even, with Donald Jr., who's just a narcissistic reflection of him in a lot of ways. Even if, Trump doesn't get another year, doesn't get time in office, he would get some enjoyment with his children, right, becoming in charge of the Trump Republicans.
Oh, or his own network, or them taking over or being a part of, yes. I thought Don Jr. was funny. I read a report, and who knows if these things are real, that said he in private is saying, we're going to lose. I mean, he's putting on the front face of fighting to the end, but in private he's saying we're going to lose. And it's like, if you guys didn't act like complete assholes 24/7, maybe you'd have a shot. But,
I have to tell you, I thought this back in 2000. We've known each other for way too long. You're probably saying to yourself, oh my God, I got to talk to this guy again. But, I think that the only way that the Republican Party as it is now, structured as it is now, as prominently white guy, white person party, is to really do what Trump did. And just drill and just keep drilling.
Yep. Maybe he wins this time. And if they stay on that path, maybe they win one more. But as the demographics shift, we're seeing the dying gasps, and that's why it's getting so out of control. Is when the ship is going down. I mean, it takes a lot to be the orchestra on the crew of the Titanic and keep playing calmly. No, generally chaos breaks out, and that's what we're seeing is chaos.
Right. Well, I always think of myself in that lighthearted way as a person who's just the opening act for the band on the Titanic.
It's a good way of looking at comedy in general.
I think so.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the 538 site, and they're saying Biden is slightly favored to win the election right now.
I'll never trust that site again.
Yeah.
Not after 2016. Not just that, but I don't know that I want to trust any polls anymore. I wanted to turn what I'm about to say into a joke, but I never did because I'm not a political comic. I read a very extensive, expansive article in, I believe, the New York Times on a poll that they had done. And they broke down how this poll was the best, most reliable, most accurate poll that they learned from 2016. They learned from 538. They saw how they missed the Trump voters. And they really broke down how they're getting it right this time. The problem I had with it was, at the end of the day, the method they used to get answers or results was the same. They would call people and they would ask a question and they would mark that down. And the reason I have a problem with that, and the joke I wanted to make, is that you are obviously dealing with the dumbest people on the planet, because the first thing they do is they see an unknown caller or a blocked number and they decide to answer it.
Yep.
That's mistake number one. Then someone says, I'd like to ask you a few questions about politics, and they don't hang up. I mean, so these are the people that are giving us the polling results. People who answer. I never answer spam. Never. I look down and it says phone call from an area code or unknown call, and boop, I do not answer. So the sheer fact that the polls represent people who answer their phone on an unknown call, that is strike one. Because they said in 2016 they still called a lot of landlines, and now they've worked in mobile calling. And then again, who doesn't hang up? I mean, that's the person on the left and the right, doesn't matter, who goes, damn right, I'm going to talk to you and give you my opinion on politics. And then they answer those questions. And those are not the people I want to hear from. Those are the people that are set in stone. I am more interested. You said you are on the left. I find myself, the older I get, and with everything that's gone on, more centrist than ever. And I'm not saying I like it. I used to be young and angry and liberal, but I'm just old now, and now just sort of sitting in the middle like,
This is funny, because if anything, and once again, I've been very straightforward about this. I've become more to the left, and I was much more centered. But then, and there's probably a lot of motivated thinking on my part on this, some kind of fallacy. We have a guy in the chat right now, David Woolley, who wrote a book on cognitive fallacies. But I really do think that when I look at the data, it is radical movements like Black Lives Matters, which push the conversation to the left, and which pushes the whole conversation for the country to the left. And so,
is Black Lives Matter radical though?
It was radical before 3 years ago, certainly. Okay. You know, before the shootings, there would be a lot of people who would say that. But that's the power of these movements that are motivated and focused, is that they aren't really that radical anymore. But you're talking about Colin Kaepernick a couple of years ago taking a knee. That seems pretty tame in comparison to what's going on now in terms of people being out in the streets.
True, I suppose. Yeah, it's like anything, I suppose, where you say universal health care 5-10 years ago. Go to Obama's first presidency. He tried and succeeded to enact a Heritage Foundation sponsored plan that was implemented by a Republican governor, and Republicans went nuts. Today, universal health care is, I don't want to say on the table, but it's more acceptable than it was when that was being pushed.
It's definitely more of a conversation. It is something when people talk about what are we going to do about healthcare, at least people aren't shrugging their shoulders and not even wanting to talk about Medicare for all.
Yeah. So, all right. So I see your point. I guess my problem, I don't know how to put it, is the de-evolution of what we've seen with the protests, and I get it. I get that it's a few bad apples. It's the protesters. I mean, Portland, Oregon, it's been widely reported that 90% of the protesters are good, maybe even more than 90%. And they go home when the lights go down, and then a few agitators, whip things up. And then the whole movement gets labeled by those of the actions of the few. And I feel that same way about the cops. I don't know how many police-citizen interactions there are in a day. When one ends in a shooting, suddenly it's all cops are bad. And I'm like, all right, I'm not willing to go down that path either. I'm not willing to condemn any group because of the actions of a few. It's funny to me that the left, this hasn't been an issue, I don't think, for maybe 10 years, but they used to say, hey, you don't condemn all Muslims because of the actions of a few Arabs, are now willing to say all cops suck because of the actions of it. It's funny how whenever it fits your narrative, kind of like on the right where they say all lives matter, abortion is bad,
Right.
Everyone has their own hypocrisies. That's why I find myself shifting to the middle, because I just look at each side with their hypocrisies and go, I want no part of it. I'm sure I have my own hypocrisies. I'm just too blind to see them because I'm me, and that makes me special. I'm a snowflake.
I like taking ownership for my own hypocrisies. I like owning them, going to sleep with them at nighttime and waking up with them in the morning.
I would too if I was self-aware enough to know what mine are.
Right.
Anybody chatting that knows me, please point them out to me. I'm sure they are numerous. I probably know where they are. I just can't think of them right now because I want to be dishonest to you. I want to lie and pretend I'm perfect. So my brain is suppressing my inadequacies.
Right. So dude, are your kids going to school? Are they going to school in September? What's the whole scene out there about that?
Well, the school district was offering 9-week blocks. After 9 weeks, you could change your mind. You could either go to the partial in-person school for 9 weeks, 2 days on, 3 days off, every other day, whatever it is, or you could do virtual online for 9 weeks. And at the end of those 9 weeks, switch or, maintain whatever it is. They didn't want to lock anybody in for the entire school year. Once you make a decision, you're done. And we said, you know what? We're not afraid, but we are cautious. And since there's so much unknown, let's take the first 9-week block and just keep them home and do online. And plus, and this is the important part, schools will probably only make it 3 days and then they'll go online anyway. So why even try? And then given what we talked about earlier with Iowa City and my county being one of the worst spreaders, the school district just said, fuck it. We're not even going to try and open. We're just going online. And so the wife and I were like, we didn't even make it to 3 days. Looks like we made the right decision. And whatever happens in 9 weeks, we'll revisit it again. Again, not deathly afraid of the coronavirus, but just respectfully cautious.
Yeah.
Wear the mask in store. Don't go out if unnecessary. We've gone to restaurants. We eat on the patio. I don't understand the whole wear your mask to the table, then take it off and eat and put it on and leave. We eat outside on the patio. And when the weather gets cold, I guess we're staying inside and going back to takeout. But it's not nail biting, but it's just, this is a disease. You got to respect it because it doesn't care about you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking, my oldest is out of high school. He just graduated last year. Mm-hmm. And my youngest is going into her sophomore year. And we opted, and thank my fictitious God, my ex-wife and I are on the same page. All three of us are on the same page, is that we're just doing distance education until a vaccine happens, basically.
And it's nice that a sophomore is you can reason with and discuss things with her. It's not just, this is what it will be. With my kids, they didn't want to go to school anyway. Like, yay, we're staying home. But had they been the other way, they're like, I want to go visit friends. It's not happening. Sorry. Because mine are 6 and 8. I mentioned 6 earlier, but yeah, mine are young and they know, coronavirus means we can't do a lot of things. They know it's a disease, but that's about all they know. We don't instill fear in them. Right.
Well, that's smart. That is smart that you're not instilling fear in your kids, right?
Yeah, I think so because, just kids are malleable. I learned that before becoming a dad. You hear about kids that lost siblings and how they just adapt to it or they go through divorce. My own childhood, I was poor white trash. I had no clue until I got older and then looked back on the places we lived and, substance existing, we were on welfare but as a kid, it's just normal. So if you tell the kids, oh my God, there's this scary disease out there right now, we can't go outside, and you do that repeatedly, you're going to raise kids full of fear. But if we tell them, all right, so we're going to wear masks now. I know you didn't for the first 5 years of your life, but we've got a disease. Who knows when it's going to go? My son, the 6-year-old, when he gets a flu shot, my wife told him once, well, that's getting soldiers put into your body. The shot puts soldiers in your body to attack the disease. And now he asks every so often, hey, are there going to be soldiers to fight the coronavirus? And we're like, hopefully, buddy. So we just treat it as what is. It's not good. It's not bad. I mean, it's bad, but you don't instill the fear in them.
Right. Very good. Brainbug was mentioning in the chat that liberals and leftists are not in the same group. That is correct. They are on the Venn diagram.
That's what I just started reading too, is discrediting it as a...
Right. So that's great. Is everyone basically healthy within your pod, within your group?
Yeah, we had it wasn't a scare. We weren't scared at all. But my daughter was the first one of us to get tested 2 days ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Her friend's brother had a fever and a couple other symptoms, and they had been playing earlier that day. And we're like, all right, well, let's just talk to a doctor. And the doctor said, let's get her tested. And she went in and went through a drive-through, got a nasal swab. And at 2 a.m., we got the email. I guess they're doing this 24/7. Yeah, 2 a.m. an email came through that said negative. So we woke up the next morning. It was right there. The test was at about 6:45 at night. And they said, we might get it to you tonight, might be tomorrow. But yeah, 2 a.m. an email came through. And so she's the first one to get tested, came back negative. Then the kid she played with came back negative.
Great.
So that was the closest we've come. But I mean, we jumped on it within an hour. We said, all right, again, not fear. Holy crap, she could be sick. We could all be sick. It's just, we even said he's got a fever and a couple other symptoms. It's probably just a common cold, a summer cold, whatever you want to call it. Let's just, caution is the better part of valor. And so we got her tested.
Good. Yeah, I just got my 4th test done on Wednesday. And I have to tell you, it doesn't get any easier.
Really? Because I am one of those people that loves football. Oh, I live for football. So I'm watching Hard Knocks, even though I couldn't give 2 fucks about the Chargers or the Rams. It's they're centered in Los Angeles, so they're covering both teams. And I had read all about the tickle your brain swab.
Oh yeah.
And the one they're showing on TV is literally like boop, right there. They're saying they're doing little nasal swabs. That's it. They're not. I've seen video of the tickle your brain swab, and maybe the NFL has money to burn. Well, they do, but they're getting little tiny nasal swabs.
Yes, I have consistently gotten the brain swabs. The first time I got tested, they lost my results, so I never got those results.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah, that was very sweet. And but yeah, each and every time it's like, and it's just, yeah, I'm just a baby. Everyone might be surprised about this. The first time, right? The first time we went to a walk-up clinic, my girlfriend and I, and no, we were in the car the second time that I had the test. And I had no idea it was going to be the brain swab because I'm blissfully ignorant about a lot of things. And so the person's like putting the swab up my nose, and I'm like retreating backwards. And my girlfriend, like in some kind of weird porn video, is holding my head forward to make sure that I'm not retreating too far. It was a bizarre nexus point of dysfunction. That's what it was.
The first thought I had when you said my girlfriend, I mean, I obviously let you finish talking, but I'm like, there's your joke on stage. Now you know what it feels like. I mean, that's the comment right there. My girlfriend grabs the back of my head and says, now you know what it feels like.
Brilliant.
My daughter described it like being punched by a caterpillar inside her nose.
Oh, dude, that's brilliant.
I thought that was nice. Yeah.
So are you writing, because you're not just a comedian? I know that you're doing a podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
Idiots on Parade.
Idiots on Parade. And how often is that out?
Twice weekly now. Jake and I, my buddy Jake, do an audio one every Monday. And then my old college friend Barrett and I have started doing a video one, just because he's a musician and he's getting back to gigging, because musicians can do more outdoor things.
Yeah.
But when we were both just locked in, we're like, well, we talk on the phone. Why don't we just record this shit? So
no, that's a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you're doing this, correct? I mean, well, you're always expanding your empire with blogs and podcasts and just doing something different.
It's a natural extension of my dysfunction, basically. I believe it is a flowering, my flowering petals of dysfunction I like to spread throughout the world. Yeah, right. I've been somewhat successful on the blog, and so I thought I would actually focus on YouTube.
There you go. Oh, so you asked about writing. I wrote You and I talked about this maybe in private, or maybe I hinted it to you after I was done. I'm not someone that's like, well, the project I'm working on now, because I think that's because everybody's working on a project.
Right,
but
everyone is.
I wrote my first book of fiction, and this might actually make an interesting story. Who knows? I'll tell it anyway, and then, watch as the viewers drop off as it's not interesting. My wife got to experience a very small taste of what it is like to be artistic, I guess. Is that a way of putting it? So I wrote this book, first book of fiction, and I didn't tell my wife, actually. I didn't tell anyone. And when it was done or half done, I just sort of gave it to her, and she read it, and she took me out to eat and said, okay, had to get away from the kids because I want to talk to you about this. I read all your other books because I was there, and they're good. I like them. I can understand why they didn't sell because, you're not famous and they're about your life. So, this is good. She said, what are you going to do with it? I said, I'm just going to self-publish it and put it out there because no one cares about me. And she goes, right. No, you need to get an agent. This is actually a good book. And my wife reads 2 books a week. In quarantine, she's read over 40 books. So she reads a lot. And she said, this is as good or better than a lot of the stuff I read. This is a good book. And I said, all right, well, no one cares. She goes, no, I said, tell you what, if you want to get me an agent, then let's do it, or I'll just self-publish. She ran into a brick wall. She discovered what it is like to have something that you believe in. And she said, your other books are fine. I actively like this book. So she started contacting agencies and saying, please read this. This is really compelling. And just the indifference of no response or a form letter that says, so and she said it was hard. She said she did not like it on my behalf. She said, I believe in my husband. I believe in this book. And here I am putting myself out there and I'm getting treated as if I don't exist. Like I'm an ant, a bug getting stepped on. And I said, all right, yeah, that's what I go through every day. But I appreciated her trying. So I said, all right, I will try and get an agent. I went through this once before with my first book, and I have a spreadsheet, and I have had some really interesting rejections.
Oh, I'm fascinated about the rejections. Are they the form letter, or do you get the handwritten stuff?
No. The form letters, I don't call those interesting because those are just, first of all, let's start at the beginning. Anybody watching this, anybody in the chat list, David or God equals the square root of 1, both of them, Blazing Wizard Pope. You can Google any literary agent, and every agency says the same thing. We are looking for new authors. We're actively seeking out new authors. We want new authors. And then you get the form letter rejection, or it just says, if we don't write back, we're not interested.
Yeah.
The interesting rejections I have gotten, let's try and go through them in my head as I remember them. One was great. The guy said, I'm going to be honest with you. Good stuff. Artistic doesn't sell anymore. The bean counters control the publishing industry right now. Anti-Trump and race books are all that are selling. That's the second. Another rejection I got was just basically said, no one buys fiction anymore, which is kind of what the first guy said, just put differently. He was more specific. Only Trump and race relations is selling, but the second, only nonfiction. One person said, have you tried? I said, you have a really interesting and original voice. Have you tried? My book of fiction is kind of like a thriller, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so her response was, have you tried reading a bunch of thrillers to see how they sound?
Yes.
Which is saying you are interesting and original, but why don't you sound more like what everyone else is doing? Which I get in a way.
Yeah, you have to work. I mean, and you know this, and we've talked about this. I've talked about it with a ton of other people, is that people don't want too much creativity in the creative arts. They want something that they can hear that's familiar to them, but with a twist.
Right. And that's what the guy, they are looking to make money. And that's exactly what it is. That's what the guy said. He said the bean counters are in charge. And so there might have been a couple other ones, but I get the last one that said you have a very original and unique voice. Have you tried being more mainstream? Because it's like music. Hit makers with Tin Pan Alley or the people that make music today, there is a formula. I read a book, can't remember what it's called, on writing a hit song, and they know exactly what they are doing. And so that's what she said. She said, if you're really interested in writing thrillers, be formulatic. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm more interested in being me. And if that doesn't make me Stephen King, I'm fine with that. So the end result is it is more than likely I will end up self-publishing this one too, because I can't find anyone to go out on a limb for me.
I actually have a couple of thoughts on this, and it might be helpful,
Sure.
or it may not be. One is that it's funny. I think it was Jerry Seinfeld once again who said that comedians basically spend our time figuring out who we are in the world and being more of who we are, and that's how we make our comedy.
Yeah, I like that.
And he said that the difference with actors is that actors are being other people. So it's two different skill sets.
Which is why I remember, I couldn't give you a date, like I was 10 years old, but I remember having the realization, watching the Oscars and watching these actors and actresses who can just become another person.
Yeah.
I would like to thank my manager and my agent and the lawyers who helped me and the studio. I mean, just no personality, nothing interesting to say. Some of them look nervous. And then, the more I'd watch Letterman or any other talk show, just completely vacuous, boring interviews, no personality. I'm like, okay, so what you just said, they can absolutely, if given a piece of paper, lock into that and develop that character, but they are empty shells on their own half the time.
I've been to a couple of seminars about writing, about marketing writing, and what people are looking for are folks who can do their own marketing, right? I mean, you have a podcast, you have a following. I don't know if you led with that when you were talking with agents, but if agents understand that you already have an infrastructure, that can't help.
I put in that I was a comic, that I tour the country, well, not now, incessantly. So, I'm in front of 200 people every show, and, that doesn't seem to, yes, to God equals the square root of 1. Amazon has a great self-publishing service. It used to be back in the day that if you wanted to self-publish a book, I mean, it was so cost prohibitive that you had to buy like 1,000 copies of your own book and then distribute it. So you'd be, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 just for your own book. Mm-hmm. Now Amazon does print on demand. Yeah. So you just give them the book, and if someone buys it, they print it and sell it and give you $1. And if no one buys it, you are not out any money. So that's why we'll probably self-publish, because it no overhead. They don't charge a fee to put it in their system. It just takes up ones and zeros for them. So it's fantastic. As much as Amazon is viewed as the evil empire, being big actually has benefits.
It does. And God equals square root of -1. Seth Andrews published a book. Seth Andrews is really big within the atheist movement, within the secular movement, has a giant following. And he just published a book, and I think it's a New York Times bestseller.
There you go.
It's doing really well. But that is someone who has a following, and they write a book specifically for that following.
Yeah, it's focused.
So it's very focused to their fan base, and you can see why. And I believe it's a nonfiction book too, when I think about it. Yeah.
Good luck. Thank you.
But what I have found in terms of my shitty joke writing is that I found that the jokes, or in terms of my blog posts, right, the stuff that I think that I like, and once again, I know that we talked about this, the stuff that I like are typically the overthinking jokes, the overthinking premises to the post. And those aren't the ones that are popular. The ones that are popular are the ones that I don't overthink, the ones that just come out in the middle of a tweet, or the ones I just am talking with friends about, or my girlfriend. And those premises are the ones that people find popular.
Yeah. I don't want to say no one likes being challenged, but those that do are very focused, and you have to work hard to get them. Once you've got them, they're yours.
Yeah.
But, and then every so often there's a breakthrough, like Chappelle in his last YouTube special, it was, where there weren't very many jokes in that.
They
But
were.
it got
No.
huge hits because it's Chappelle and people trust him. They're going to like, all right, it's Chappelle. I'm going to watch him and see where he goes. So once you find your crowd, it's just that it is a very big pond out there and very big ocean. So
Yeah.
to get your chum in the water and attract those sharks.
So is your pivoting a little bit back to home life? Is your wife working from home? Are you guys,
Yep.
Oh, that's good.
She works for the university and she is in marketing. And so hopefully her job is pretty safe right now, because if there's anything they need, it's hey, come to our university. Yes, we're open during a pandemic, or you can do online. Yeah, she's been able to work from home since March, and yeah, it's working well. We haven't had any I know of a couple COVID divorces or people that are really unhappy, and we've avoided that. Our kids, as I said earlier, they like being home. I think they like having us around. I mean, they're kids. They enjoy mommy and daddy. So
right. Yeah, it's interesting you should mention COVID divorces. My ex-wife was a social worker, and whenever there was a big storm, like one of those snowstorms, a blizzard, that people would be snowed in for days, that's when, if you're already in a dysfunctional relationship with someone and suddenly you're trapped inside with them for days, it can really put some strains on a structure that was already shoddy to begin with. So I hadn't really thought about COVID divorces, but I imagine there's quite a few of them.
Well, I'll say two things. One is, within the past 2 weeks, I read something where, I don't know if you remember, in March, everyone, when we went into quarantine, said, oh, wait till December, we're going to have a lot of quarantine babies. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, there was a report that said, no, the exact opposite. People are actually more fearful of the future. So instead of, like in a blackout, they can trace, oh, this is just a power outage, let's have sex. Right. Oops, here's a bunch of babies. Where this was more like, we don't know what's going to happen with the economy, with our life, with anything. So baby making actually slowed down. And then the other thought I had was, you actively, if I am not mistaken, moved in with your girlfriend within the past year, actually less than the past year, probably around the time quarantine started, or maybe even a little ways into quarantine. Like,
this is true, brother. We happened to move. We had already planned the move before quarantine, and I had been spending a lot of time at her place, but we made the move just in the very early stages of lockdown, and it was pretty freaking crazy.
Yeah. They're trying to rent a U-Haul or just do it carload by carload, or...
Oh, yeah. You're wondering that, we were able to get movers, but even that created, there was no stress between the two of us, but there's always the fear of getting infected, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny you say there's no stress between the two of us. The only stress that happens between my wife and I is when she gets stressed out over something is not even on my radar, like moving. The last time we moved, she would say things like, moving is so stressful. I'm like, we're just picking up our shit and putting it somewhere different. Like, moving is so stressful. I'm like, no, you don't respect my feelings. So we don't fight, but it's like, that's the closest we come to something, is when she's stressed and I'm not, because I'm very, very rarely stressed.
Yeah.
Just because as a comic and someone that's trying, I have been beaten down and so much rejection in my life that now, oh, there's a disease, I guess we're going to be locked inside. Oh, there are race riots. Well, how about that? I'm just old and world weary at this point.
What I would like to see is an apocalyptic movie where comedians are doing quite well, because I think that, maybe we don't have the survival skills, but in terms of the resiliency.
Yeah. Well, it's also being Gen X. My wife is 10 years younger than I am. She was born in 1980, and she calls herself Gen X because she doesn't want to be associated with millennials, but she's right on the cusp. That 1980 is right on the cusp, whereas Gen X, there have been articles written that we're just breezing through this. Like, we've seen so much in our life: the Atlanta child murders, the OPEC oil embargo, the gas lines, the unemployment of the 80s, the Cold War. Everything now is we're just observation. We were the latchkey kids. We were the latchkey generation. I was this freaks me out if I think about it. Again, this goes back to what I said about kids being adaptable. When I was in third grade, I was a latchkey kid. I would walk from my mom and dad were separated. It's a long story. He abducted me, or he, they were going to get divorced. So that's how he forced them to stay together. Is I'm going to come take your kid. She was living in another city. It was called a family matter back then. Today it would be called an Amber Alert and an abduction. Back then it was in the family. So he came and got me, and my mom saw a lawyer, and the lawyer said, well, maybe you should just go back to him. It's like, that's how different things were back then.
Dude, was that in the 70s? Or was that?
Yes, that was in the 70s.
The 1970s was like the Stone Age in comparison to where we are now. People just do not understand.
Nope. I mean, literally, when I hear about it, and again, I didn't know back then. I'm just like, my dad's like, all right, you're coming with me. I'm like, all right, I'm going with dad. The fact he didn't tell my mom, so it wasn't like he came and, grabbed me. I was his kid. So I'm like, okay, I guess I live here now. That's what I'm saying about being adaptable. So I'm in third, fourth grade, and we're on the cusp of the inner city of Milwaukee, walking into a mile into the inner city. I went to a school that, I was whitey, basically. And I look at my daughter now, and she crosses the street, and I'm in the house freaking out, like, look both ways, look both ways, look both ways, look both ways. I'm not going to instill that fear in her, like, get out there and like, look both, what's wrong with you? You're crossing a street. But the sheer fact of what I went through versus what I try and allow her to go through as much as possible, because I want her to be independent.
Yes.
But the whole point is I'm Gen X. So as I watch the world crumble around me, I am basically sitting back and going, this is interesting. It's not that meme where the dog is sitting in the burning hell saying this is fine. Right. I know it's not fine, but it doesn't create deep anxiety and fear in me. I just take it every day as it comes.
I will agree with you and add on is that our generation, in terms of Gen X, we have things that other generations after us will not know or will not experience. For an example, my dad, he had one blue-collar job for 30 years at the phone company. With that job, and he wasn't in management, he was just a guy. And he had 2 houses, 2 cars, and he always had money in his pocket.
Auto workers used to have a lake house and a boat. I mean, because of the unions, and now they get laid off and struggle. And to Brainbug, who says millennials are awesome, I do have a joke that is sort of about millennials, but in I don't want to say positive way. I have nothing against millennials. I think they are the ones that unfortunately got raised poorly by their parents, who instilled the fear we talk about in them, or if not fear. One thing I talk about is that everyone makes fun of millennials, calls them the snowflake generation, participation trophy generation, and so on. And while that is true, and there's a reason for that, it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Had they been raised, at some point, a kid, because they were a kid, said, "Well, I didn't win. I won a trophy or a ribbon." And the parents said, "You get one too," and invented the participation trophy or the 8th place ribbon. And so when you're given that as a kid and that's how you're raised, it's the parents' fault. And I never blame millennials or say, millennials suck, or they're all a bunch of whiny, me. It's generational. It ebbs and flows. Like,
I think also in terms of, and this may not be in your case, but I know that I have, and I mentioned this the other day on one of my conversations, is that I have directly benefited from intergenerational wealth. Mm-hmm. In a myriad of different ways. And I think millennials and people who come after millennials are not going to enjoy that. They are being in a grip of the fact that their parents are getting reverse mortgages, or that their parents are heavily in debt, and all that money that my generation really got, it's just going to be gone. And I think that creates a certain amount of anxiety and uncertainty.
Yep.
And well-founded too. I would be, always in the back of my head, there is a feeling, and we can exchange like crapped out kind of horror stories about our youth till like the sun goes down. But I still feel at least economically safe and secure.
Yeah. And
I don't think other generations have that.
No. And I'm having a thought, and I had the thought because of what you said, but it's not directly applicable. So forgive the odd segue.
Yeah, please.
My kids yesterday at the doctor, which we talked about earlier, their physical, he said, what do you want to, the nurse practitioner in the pre-interview was like, and what do you want to be when you grow up? And they both said veterinarian. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Because last year my daughter said YouTube star. And I'm like, not a chance in fucking hell. And that to me it goes back to what you said about your dad. Here's a guy that worked at the phone company his whole life, whereas that shit's off the table. Almost anything is off the table when it comes to being a lifer and a job. So the fact that what kids look at today as their future, it's fluid, it's not fixed, and that can be good or bad depending on your personality.
True enough. God equals the square root of -1 says, I got a participation trophy, says Gen X. Just didn't take them seriously. They seemed like a failure to me. Yeah, I can see that.
Yep.
I can see that. So Nathan, we are coming close to the end of our hour together. Is there a question you wanted me to ask you? Was there a topic you wanted to talk about, but we just didn't get around to?
No, I'm just free flow. I go into these things without any agenda because it's more fun, because you can tell in certain interviews, like celebrities, when they have an agenda and they get asked something different, they always try and bring it back to what they want to talk about.
Yeah.
So I always try and keep everything out of my head and let the person talking to me steer the ship, because that way, hopefully I can be more organic, not interesting, but more organic in my answers. And some might view that as sloppy, but I would rather be, quote, in the moment than always like biting at the chomp, like, finally, he asked about that thing I did.
Right.
Now I get to tell you. That's not how I operate. I can say this just popped into my head out of the blue. My last comedy album, which came out January, maybe, I just got an email last week that said 5 of the tracks are being accepted onto Sirius XM radio, their comedy channel. So that was pretty happy to get. Anybody wants to hear the full thing, or I think 4 of my 6 CDs, you can just look up Nathan Timmel on Spotify or Pandora, and you can hear all of them.
Fantastic. Well, Nathan, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thank you for having me, as always. It's always nice that whenever you do one of these new projects, like focusing on YouTube, that you think of me. I absolutely appreciate it. And if I do anything worthwhile or interesting, I hope to return the favor and try and boost your profile.
Well, thank you, sir. I do appreciate that.
Never get the ability to boost anything. Thank you, Brainbug and God. And there was one other person.
Blazing.
Mr. Pope, thanks for watching with us.
Yeah. This has been a lot of fun, guys.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone. And it's going to be a live mic for